Today's opening trap is the refutation of Damiano's defense. Damiano's defense is an ancient chess opening: pawn e4, e5, knight f3, and pawn to f6. As Grandmaster Ben Finegold says, never play f6. This opening trap is a great demonstration of why not to do this. Still, despite the fact that this is really bad and there are no coaches or books or anything recommending for black to do this, I see this fairly often. I have had the chance to do this in at least 10 games, and I have seen it done in scholastic tournaments at the 800 to 1000 level fairly often. I guess there's a fair number of times that someone says, hey, why isn't f6 a bad move? And then they see this trap and they never do it again. But you got to get your hand burned on the kitchen stove a few times before you learn not to do that. So after knight takes e5 here, black is in a tough spot. Knight takes e5 basically pockets a pawn. Now black can be kind of clever and choose not to take back here, but if you're not taking back, why'd you play the move f6? You were trying to defend e5, so you're going to capture on e5 in most cases. Now we get the move queen h5 check, and the obvious problem is that g6 here runs into queen takes e5 with a fork, and after a block, we do pick up the rook on h8. Very nice. So, what if black tries to be a little more clever and doesn't go for the move g6? Instead, they try king to e7. Now we also need to be clever. We're going to go queen takes pawn on e5, king f7, bishop c4. If black simply tries to run with the king does not run very far. It's forced over to h6, and then we can play d3 or d4, and we're basically winning the game on the spot. We'll see some examples of how badly wrong this can go for black in just a moment, but instead of, in this position, moving the king, black has a more clever move, and you do need to know the refutation of this move. We can try pawn d5. Freeing the bishop on c8 is well worth a pawn here, and after white captures here on d5 and black tries king g6, the bishop covers queen to f5, so white no longer has a simple queen f5 check and then a discovery with pawn d3 or d4 to annihilate black. At this point, the best move is pawn to h4 here. The threat of h5 is similar to the idea of queen f5 we just saw. We're going to play the h-pawn forward, and then we'll open up our bishop on c1 with d3 or d4. We annihilate black. So black should try here pawn h5, physically stopping the pawn from advancing to h5 for white. Now, the best way to win here is a very nice idea. You do need to get your move orders right, but in this position, we have bishop takes on b7. We fork the bishop on c8 and the rook on a8, and this is a good example of a decoy. We're trying to get black, or a deflection, to step away with the bishop on c8, which black now does, and we get the f5 square. After we get the f5 square, things are immediately over. The king can try to run over here to h6. We can expose him with the pawn push to d4 or d3. And after g5 here, there are many wins. Of course, you can simply take on g5 and you fork the king and the queen, and you're winning all the material. That's very easy. But the immediately mating move that is really beautiful is queen to f7 here. After the queen comes up to f7, there is no defense to the threat of taking on g5 with the pawn, and after queen takes, simply rook takes h5, and because the queen is pinned, this is mate on the board. I hope that you get the chance to use this in your game and to teach someone why playing f6 is so bad on move 2. If you enjoyed this trap, also check out our opening traps covering traps in the King's Gambit and lots of other great lines.